Virginia Department of Corrections, Red Onion State Prison. To accept this call, press 0.
This is Randall Via. I'm currently serving 1,214 years for capital murder in Red Onion State Prison in Powell, Virginia, in the USA. And this is my podcast, Red Onion Randy. However, today will be the last recorded podcast coming from Red Onion. Even though I will still and always be Red Onion Randy, I'll no longer be recording because they came yesterday and packed my property up to transfer me to another prison, which I'm assuming is Wallens Ridge, but I'll keep you posted on that. Today's podcast is going to be a little bit different. My executive producer, Professor Garbutt, is currently in Kyrgyzstan teaching a class at the University of Central Asia. And for some of his senior grad students, he's teaching them about my podcast and, communication and so on and so forth. And two of his students had questions for me. One wasn't there, so when you listen, you'll hear Michael asking me Ada's questions and me answering. And then you have Biba Soro, who was in Michael's office for a meeting when I happened to call and we recorded. She asked some very good follow-up questions. So this episode isn't just me simply talking for 20 minutes. It's a conversation I'm having with two different people. And very good questions, very insightful questions, and I thought they would be interesting to my listeners. So I hope you enjoy.
Hi, Randy. I've got some questions here from one student, and let me just find it here. Her name is Aida, and Aida's got some quite challenging questions for you. So the first one, Aida asks, how often do you cry?
I don't cry very often anymore. There's a stereotype of, a false masculinity in prison. Everybody's tough, everybody's hard, everybody's a killer. That's a damn lie. There's not a single person in prison who has not cried themselves to sleep at one point or another. Especially when you first come into prison. Now, I don't really cry anymore. It's been a little while since I have cried because I've been in prison, going on 32 years, something like that. I can't remember the dates all the time, but you do become inured to it, to being in here. But, I don't cry over my situation or anything like that anymore. It is what it is. However, if I see something, that happens to like a child or an animal on television, or like a family that, loses all of the members of their family, like you have like a mass school shooting, like I'll tear up over something like that because, that's something that bothers me,
You have 1 minute remaining.
I'll have to call back. That was that 5 3-minute phone call.
Mm-hmm. So we were just talking about tears in prison, and you gave a great answer, I think. I'm here with Bibi Soro. You had a follow-up question, did you?
No, I mean like after Randy will answer, I might have some questions to his answers or something, but yeah, I'm fine now. Thank you.
All right. Did you want to add anything, Randy, to that?
No, that was my answer.
Okay, thank you. The next one, these are very difficult questions that Aida's asking, but you're good at pitching them. So the next question she asks is, what do you miss the most in prison?
Oh, I miss choices the most. In here, you only have a limited number of choices that you get to make. You have no physical freedom. You know what? Actually, I'm going to change my answer because I miss human contact the most. That's absolutely, that's what I miss the most. You know, when y'all are with your friends and your family, y'all touch one another. You'll put your hand on someone's shoulder. You'll hug someone. You'll shake someone's hand. You know, there's contact. There's like actual physical touching. In prison, there's none of that. You know, like if you walk up to me and you put your hand on my shoulder, I'm gonna knock your head off if I can, because I'm thinking you're getting ready to grab me, to put me in a move, or to hurt me, or do something like that. You know, so there's no touching in prison. There's no contact in prison. You know, I do miss the freedom to make a choice, you know, a real choice. But yeah, I think I miss contact the most. You know, y'all have no idea what it's like to crave a hug year after year after year for over 2 decades. You know, that's not something I would wish on my worst enemy.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
I just had a question pop up in my mind. If you had a chance to change one thing about the life in prison or the system of the prison, what would that thing be?
Oh, wow. Oh, my God, I could do 45 episodes of podcast on this question. Accountability. There's maybe one out of every 1,000 inmates who holds themselves accountable. Other than that, there's just no accountability in prison at all. There's just no one willing to stand up and say, you know what, I was wrong. I'm the one that made the choices I made. I'm the one that put myself in prison. And it's just so sad to see that nobody is willing to just stand up and just take responsibility. That's the one thing I would change.
Thank you, Randy. Did you want to follow up on
that? Just one question. Maybe it's not very relevant to this one, but at what point of your time in prison, like, did you start accepting the reality and maybe educating yourself and changing your perspective to what has happened? Like, when was that switching moment in your mind that changed the way you probably thought of it or something? Yeah.
Okay. I can't remember the exact year because until recently, I didn't pay attention to the years because I had, 1,214 years to do in prison. I had no hope, of getting out and so on and so forth. So I didn't pay attention to the, to days and, months and years. But I remember I was in A3 cell 22, and I was sitting on the bed, and I had just gotten finished rereading one of the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan, which is, my favorite series. And there's a character in there named Landman Jooyeon. Now, I've discussed this in my podcast previously, so for those who are interested in a more detailed explanation, can just ask Michael what episode that was, and he can let you know, and you can go and listen to it in its entirety. But as I was sitting there, I heard a voice, because I was thinking about Landman Jooyeon, and I was thinking, like, man, I wish I was this dude. I wish I was like this guy. Not just necessarily his fighting skills, because, I'm a pretty damn good fighter in my own right, though I don't know how to use a sword, and that would be kind of cool to learn. But I was thinking, like, I wanted to be more like him mentally. I wanted to be more like him with his character and, his personality and so on. And I heard a voice. Now, I did not hear this voice with my ears. I did not hear this voice in my mind. There was nothing telepathically in it. And it wasn't really a voice per se, but that's about the only way I can really explain it to make it understandable to other beings. It was something that just came up from out of my gut. You know, it was like an instinct, like it just came from my spirit. And it said, you know, and it's more of an impression than it was an actual voice. But it said the only difference between you and Land Manager Gorn are the choices that you make. And that was my epiphany. That was the moment that I had my awakening, and I opened my eyes, and I started to accept responsibility. I started to accept that I'm the one that's wrong here. I'm the one that put myself here. It wasn't my parents' fault. It wasn't society's fault. You know, it wasn't religion's fault or God's fault or the devil's fault or anybody's fault. It was mine. You know, because when I heard that voice that said, the only difference between you two are the choices that you make. And I looked up to this character. Like, this is just, the character's a figment of somebody's imagination. It's just black ink on white paper. But yet, it changed everything in my life.
So you mentioned that it's only the matter of choice, and actually you touched upon a very good idea that we discussed recently with friends. And my question now is, do you think, like, if you would have if you have lived in a different environment, like with a different family, different friends, and another neighborhood, would you have a different life, or would you still make the same choices? And it's not only about you, but about all of us. Isn't that the environment that forces us to make the choices, or is it really like, do we really have the freedom of choosing what we choose?
That's a very tough metaphysical question. Yes, I absolutely agree. First of all, you know, you have a lot of people say that you're born a certain way. So my statement and my question to them is this: if I was born to be a murderer, if I was born to be a criminal, if I was born to be a violent person, then why am I still in prison? Why am I being held accountable for my choices? Why are you punishing me for my choices if I was born to be this? Because if I was born to be this, I have no choice. So, yes, if I would have been born to Professor Michael Garbutt, there is no doubt in my mind that I would not be a criminal, because I would have gotten the love and the nurturement. I would have gotten, you know, the teachings that I needed to, you know, to succeed, to grow up and to be a happy, healthy, well-functioning adult. You know, because let's face it, they would not have beat the living hell out of me day in and day out. They wouldn't have left me laying in pools of my own blood. They wouldn't have done those things to me. So I wouldn't have had the anger issues that I had. I wouldn't have had the hurt and the pain and the rage that caused me to make really, really bad decisions, because I was so focused on my own pain, hurt, and rage, I couldn't see anything beyond that. But you have people that grow up in rich families, you know, and they come to prison too. As a matter of fact, a guy from Arizona just reached out to me. I'm not going to say his name, but, you know, he grew up in a really rich family. He actually grew up on a literal country club, a golf country club in Scottsdale, Arizona. Like, this guy was so good at golf because of growing up there that he was actually trying to make it on the PGA Tour to become a professional golfer. And then he got into a motorcycle accident and he broke his right leg and his right arm and ribs and everything. And the doctor put him on some really good pain pills. And his exact words was, "Man, it was bliss from heaven." He said, "I found what I've been searching for my whole damn life." And when the doctor took him off of those pain pills, he went to the cheap knockoff heroin, and he started smoking heroin and shooting it up. And the next thing you know, this guy's in and out of prison. You know, and now he's out for the last, you know, couple of years, and he's been, you know, drug-free and alcohol-free, and he ain't been committing crimes, and he's trying to start his own business and everything. And that's a good thing. But because he grew up in a rich environment, I grew up in an extremely poor environment, but we still wound up in prison. So obviously the socioeconomics of a person's upbringing has nothing to do with them coming to prison or not, with them being a criminal or not. Because you've got two examples of the far end. I grew up extremely, extremely, extremely poor. Like, we did not have enough food to feed 2 adults and 3 boys, so I had to feed my younger brother half of my food just so he wouldn't be hungry, and I took the hunger for him. And you got this one guy who grew up with literally everything he ever wanted, and he still wound up in prison. It comes down to who your parents are. If you have someone who will actually sit down and teach you as a parent should, then you won't come to prison. If you have a parent that's actively engaged in your life as a child, you're not going to come to prison. Now, you always have outliers. You have some people that grew up in worse situations than mine that didn't become criminals. But, just because they might not have become criminals, they're emotionally crippled still. They don't know how to have functional relationships and so on and so forth. They don't know how to have, healthy sexual relationships. They don't know how to have, healthy relationships with, with alcohol or video games or other forms of escapism. So they're still emotionally crippled. They just never actually broke the law, or they just never got caught.
Thank you very much. Just a follow-up question on your response. Do you know, what are the approximate proportions of people who come, from the healthy environment, from richer families to prison, and people who come from more or less, poor neighborhoods? What is the approximate proportion of this?
I would say 95% of all prisoners come from a very poor environment. They come from the ghetto. They come from the hood. They come from trailer parks. They come from, very rural environments. And maybe 5% of prisoners, from rich families come to prison. And it's not that, rich people don't commit crimes. It's they got the money to pay for really, really good lawyers. And these really, really good lawyers, well, they're really, really good at their jobs. They know their jobs, but they also, because they're really, really good, they have connections that they can get their clients, favorable outcomes. That's the reason why you don't have a ton of rich people in prison. It's simply because they can afford to buy their way out of it, and poor people cannot.
I see the logic now. Thank you very much for sharing your answers, your insights.
That's
Professor
great.
Garbutt.
Thank you, Randy. And is there anything you'd like to say to the group?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, there is. Sitting around a classroom and talking is a good step, but it's not the only step. Talk is cheap. Action is priceless. Be the change in your own life.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Be the change in your own life, in the life of your family, in the life of your community, the life of your nation and society that you want to be. You don't have to go out and be stupid about it, and because let's face it, most of y'all live in a very dangerous area, but you can still affect change. Just be smart about it. But always believe in yourself. Always believe that everyone around you can rise above the sins and the failures and the bleakness in their own life. Just take it one day at a time. Have faith and don't give up. Fight the good fight. But you have to do more than just talk. You have to put action to it. Faith without works is dead. I hope you enjoyed listening to a slightly more unique podcast this time. I really enjoyed that conversation. I do apologize that we got cut off a little bit short, unfortunately, and I will be back from another institution, not exactly sure when, but I'm going to get on that phone and I'm going to continue what I do because this means the world to me. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you for using GTL.